Jake Morrison stared at the tactical display as red warning lights bathed the bridge of the UES Meridian. Enemy contacts were closing fast, and their weapons were unlike anything in the human database. The sleek metallic drones moved with impossible precision, adapting to every defensive maneuver his crew attempted. "Shields down to 30%, called out Lieutenant Amy Chen from her station. Her voice stayed calm, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. They had been exploring the Kepler system for only 6 hours when the attack began. Captain Lisa Rodriguez gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered under another barrage. "Return fire, all batteries," she ordered. The Meridian's plasma cannons lit up space with brilliant blue streams, but the enemy drones simply shifted their formation and continued their relentless assault. Jake watched in fascination and growing fear as the drones learned from each attack. When the humans fired spread patterns, the enemies clustered together. When they used focused beams, the drones scattered. It was like fighting an opponent who could read their minds. "Captain, I'm detecting 17 more contacts approaching from the asteroid field," reported Danny Walsh from the sensor station. His hands moved quickly over his controls, trying to get clearer readings. "These are bigger. Much bigger." The main screen shifted to show massive shapes emerging from behind the rocky debris. Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized the true size of what they faced. Each enemy vessel was at least 3 times larger than the Meridian, and their hull design suggested technology far beyond human capability. "All stop," Rodriguez commanded. "Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." "Jump drive is offline, Captain," Chen reported. "Those first hits damaged the primary coils. We need at least 20 minutes for repairs." Jake ran calculations in his head. At their current rate of shield depletion, they had maybe 5 minutes before the enemy broke through their defenses. He opened his mouth to suggest ramming speed when something impossible happened. The space around them erupted in weapons fire, but not aimed at the Meridian. Massive biomechanical ships had appeared, as if from nowhere, engaging the drone fleet with devastating effect. Jake stared at the newcomers and felt his blood run cold. These new vessels looked like someone had grown starships from living tissue and then grafted metal plates and weapon systems onto their hulls. Organic curves mixed with mechanical angles, in ways that hurt to look at. The ships pulsed with internal light that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. "Are they attacking the drones?" Rodriguez asked, leaning forward in her chair. Jake studied the tactical display. The biomechanical ships were indeed targeting the enemy drones, using weapons that seemed to tear reality apart. Energy beams that looked more like claws ripped through the sleek metallic hulls, while projectiles that moved like living things sought out vital systems. "Captain, we're being hailed," Chen announced. "The signal is coming from the largest bioship." On screen, the main display flickered and showed something that made several crew members gasp. The creature looking back at them stood 12 feet, tall with 4 arms that ended in what looked like weapon barrels grafted directly into the flesh. Its head was elongated with multiple eyes that glowed with an inner fire. Metal plates had been surgically attached to its skull and shoulders, giving it the appearance of a living war machine. When it spoke, the words came through some kind of translation device, but Jake could feel pain at the edge of his mind, like someone pressing needles into his brain. "Small flesh ships, you fight the devourers poorly. We are Kithara. We will preserve you if you submit to our protection." Rodriguez stood slowly. "I am Captain Lisa Rodriguez of the United Earth Ship Meridian. We appreciate your assistance, but we can handle our own defense." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like metal scraping against bone. "Your weapons are toys. Your tactics are weakness. The devourers learn from every encounter. They will return with counters to your feeble efforts." As if to prove the alien's point, the remaining drones suddenly shifted their attack pattern. They began targeting the Meridian's weapon systems specifically, using precise strikes that disabled each gun emplacement in turn. Jake realized with growing horror that the enemy had indeed learned from their brief engagement. The Devourers consume star systems, the Cathera continued. They have taken 43 worlds from us over 2 centuries of war. Your species lies in their expansion path. You have perhaps 6 of your months before their main fleet arrives to harvest your planets. Jake felt the bridge fall silent except for the hum of life support systems. 6 months until Earth faced an enemy that could adapt to any defense. What do you want in return for your protection? Rodriguez asked. You will join our war fleets. Your people will learn our methods of combat. Some will survive the training. Those who do will fight beside us or watch their homeworld burn. The alien gestured with one of its weapon arms, and Jake saw more detail of the biomechanical ship around it. The walls appeared to be made of living tissue reinforced with metal supports. Creatures that might once have been similar to the commander had been modified beyond recognition, their bodies adapted for specific functions. Some served as living computers, their brains exposed and connected to ship systems. Others had been turned into mobile weapon platforms, their original forms lost beneath layers of grafted armor and firepower. We will consider your offer, Rodriguez said carefully. There is nothing to consider. Submit now or die with honor. The Devourers care nothing for your choice. Jake stepped forward. Captain, request permission to serve as liaison aboard their vessel. If we're going to survive this, someone needs to learn their methods. Rodriguez looked at him with surprise and concern. Jake, look at them. Look at what they've become. Jake studied the alien commander and its crew. They were monsters there. Was no other word for it. Everything about them suggested a species that had abandoned mercy, compassion, and perhaps even basic morality in pursuit of military effectiveness. But they were winning against an enemy that had easily outmatched. Human technology, Captain. They're our only chance. Earth needs to know what we're facing. The Cathara commander focused its multiple eyes on Jake. This one shows wisdom. He will come aboard our vessel and learn the price of survival. The rest of your kind will follow or perish. Jake felt Chen's hand grab his arm. Jake, don't do this. There has to be another way. He looked at his friend and fellow officer, seeing the fear in her eyes. But behind that fear was the same calculation he had made. The Cathara were horrifying, but they were alive. They had survived 2 centuries of war against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Send word to Earth Command, he told Rodriguez. Tell them what we've found. Tell them that humanity is going to have to change if it wants to survive. The alien commander made that scraping laugh sound again. Change, yes. Your species will change much before this war ends. Some changes cannot be undone. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized he might be looking at humanity's future. The price of survival against the Devourers might be becoming something just as monstrous as the enemy they fought. But Earth needed 6 months to prepare, and these creatures were the only ones who knew how to buy that time. Jake Morrison felt his stomach lurch as the Cathara transport beam deposited him aboard the biomechanical ship called Bone Render. The air tasted of copper and decay, while the walls around him pulsed with a rhythm that reminded him uncomfortably of a living heart. Strange growths covered the ceiling, dripping some kind of fluid that hissed when it hit the metal floor plates. Commander Vex Thule waited for him in what appeared to be a command chamber. The massive alien had added new modifications. Since their first meeting, fresh scars crossed its chest where additional weapon ports had been surgically installed, and its left eye had been replaced with some kind of targeting device that glowed red in the dim lighting. Human flesh, Morrison. You will observe our methods, Vex Thule said. The neural link that translated its words sent sharp pains through Jake's skull with each syllable. Your species fights like frightened children. This weakness will be corrected, or you will all die. Jake tried not to flinch as several smaller Cathara approached him. These warriors were younger, but no less horrifying than their commander. One had replaced both arms with weapon systems that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Another had modified its legs into something resembling mechanical spider limbs that clicked against the floor as it moved. "We begin with pain tolerance," Vexathul announced. Without warning, one of the younger Kithra pressed a device against Jake's neck. Agony shot through his nervous system, causing him to cry out and fall to his knees. The aliens watched his reaction with what might have been curiosity. "Weakness," Vexthul stated simply. "Cathara young endure this pain for days during their first modifications. You last only seconds." Jake struggled to his feet, his vision still blurred from the pain. What was the point of that? The Devourers use neural disruptor weapons. Pain is their first attack. If you cannot function through pain, you cannot fight them. Vexthul gestured to its crew. "These warriors have been modified to feel no pain at all. They fight until their bodies fail completely." The next several hours were a nightmare of training exercises. Jake watched Cathara warriors throw themselves against practice targets with complete disregard for injury. When one young fighter broke both its legs during a combat drill, it simply crawled forward and continued attacking until its commander ordered it to stop. "Your human tactics preserve individual life," Vexthul explained as medics began repairing the injured warrior. "This is inefficient. Better to lose 10 warriors quickly than to lose 100 slowly." Jake watched the medical procedure with growing horror. The Cathara medics didn't heal the broken legs so much as replace them entirely. Living tissue was carved away and discarded while mechanical substitutes were grafted directly into the warrior's spine. Throughout the procedure, the patient remained conscious and showed no signs of distress. "Does it hurt?" Jake asked. "Pain is irrelevant," the wounded warrior replied. "Function is all that matters. These new legs will serve better than the weak flesh I was born with." That evening, Jake was given quarters that were barely large enough for a human to stand upright. The walls were covered with the same organic growth he had seen elsewhere on the ship, and a small creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a plant provided dim light from the corner. He tried to contact the Meridian but found that communications were blocked. The next day brought actual combat. A Devourer scouting force had been detected near a mining colony, and the Bone Render was part of a strike fleet sent to destroy them. Jake watched from the command chamber as Vexthul planned the attack. "We will ram their formation at maximum speed," the commander announced to its officers. "Half our ships will be destroyed in the initial assault. The survivors will board enemy vessels and fight until death." Jake couldn't stay quiet. "That's suicide. There has to be a better tactical approach." Vexthul turned its multiple eyes toward him. "Better approaches require time we do not have. The Devourers learn from every encounter. Quick, brutal attacks give them less opportunity to adapt. The battle itself was even worse than Jake had imagined. The Cathara fleet charged directly into the Devourer formation without any attempt at tactical maneuvering. Ships exploded around them as enemy fire found its targets, but the surviving vessels pressed forward without deviation from their course. Jake watched in sick fascination as Cathara warriors used living creatures as ammunition. Pods filled with biomechanical organisms were fired at enemy ships, where they burrowed through hulls and began destroying systems from within. The weapons were effective, but the sight of sentient beings used as expendable tools turned his stomach. When the Bone Render finally made contact with a Devourer vessel, Jake found himself swept along with a boarding party. The Cathara warriors moved through the enemy ship like a plague of destruction, killing everything in their path with ruthless efficiency. They showed no interest in taking prisoners or gathering intelligence. Jake tried to keep up but found himself falling behind as the aliens moved with inhuman speed through the corridors. When he finally caught up to the main group, he found them, standing over the remains of what appeared to be a Devourer command center. The enemy constructs had been torn apart with disturbing thoroughness. "The mission is complete," Vexthul announced. "We will destroy this vessel and return to base." "Wait," Jake called out. "We should study their technology, learn how they operate." Several Cathara turned to stare at him with expressions he couldn't read. Vexthul approached him slowly. Human flesh Morrison, you still think like prey. The Devourers learn faster than any organic mind. Every moment we spend studying them, they spend studying us. Better to destroy quickly than to risk them learning our methods. The trip back to base gave Jake time to process what he had witnessed. The Cathara tactics were horrifying but undeniably effective. They had destroyed a Devourer force that would have given human ships serious trouble, and they had done it with minimal losses compared to what conventional tactics would have cost. When they reached the Cathara staging area, Jake was surprised to find human ships already present. Captain Rodriguez had brought a small fleet to begin joint training exercises. He watched through the viewports as human crews tried to adapt Cathara bioweapons to their own vessels. Amy Chen was among the humans working on the modifications. When she saw Jake, her face showed shock at his appearance. 3 days aboard the Cathara ship had left him scarred from training exercises and marked by the neural modification devices they had tested on him. "Jake, what have they done to you?" she asked. He looked at his reflection in a nearby surface and realized she was right. His left arm bore fresh scars where Cathara surgeons had tested compatibility with their biomechanical implants. His eyes had developed a hollow look that reminded him uncomfortably of the alien warriors. "They're teaching me how to fight," he said simply. "They're changing you into something else," she replied. "This isn't what humans are supposed to be." Jake watched a group of young Cathara volunteers as they prepared for their next round of combat modifications. They seemed eager for the procedures that would make them more effective weapons. Part of him understood their enthusiasm. "Maybe what humans are supposed to be isn't enough to survive what's coming," he told her. That night, alone in his quarters, Jake stared at the communication device that would let him contact Earth. He could report that the Cathara methods worked, but at a cost that might be too high for humanity to pay. Or he could recommend that Earth begin preparing its people for the kind of changes that survival might require. In the end, he sent a simple message recommending immediate implementation of Cathara training methods for all military personnel. He told himself it was necessary for survival, but deep down, he wondered if he was already becoming the kind of monster he had feared when he first saw Vexthul. The modifications would begin with volunteers, but Jake suspected that eventually all humans would face the same choice the Cathara had made centuries ago. They could change into something that could fight the Devourers, or they could remain human and face extinction. Jake Morrison no longer recognized himself in the mirror. 3 months of fighting alongside the Cathara had changed him in ways he never thought possible. Biomechanical implants covered his left arm. Their metal surfaces fused directly with his flesh. Neural enhancement ports had been drilled into his skull, allowing him to interface directly with alien weapon systems. Most disturbing of all, he had stopped feeling revulsion at the sight of his own modifications. The joint human Cathara fleet had achieved 17 victories against Devourer scout forces. Each battle had been won through tactics that would have horrified the Jake Morrison who first boarded the Bone Render. Now he commanded a mixed squadron of human and alien fighters, using ramming attacks and biological weapons as standard procedure. Admiral Peter Kane stood in the briefing room of the command ship New Athens, watching Jake demonstrate the latest Cathara combat techniques to a group of human officers. Kane's expression showed a mixture of admiration and disgust as Jake explained how living creatures could be weaponized for ship-to-ship combat. The biomines burrow through enemy hulls and begin consuming their power systems, Jake explained, his voice carrying the flat tone he had learned from his alien mentors. Casualties among the organisms are 100%, but the tactical advantage gained justifies the expenditure. Lieutenant Danny Walsh raised his hand. "Sir, aren't we talking about using sentient creatures as ammunition?" Jake turned to look at his former crewmate. Walsh appeared shocked by Jake's appearance, unable to hide his reaction to the modifications that had become routine over the past months. The neural ports in Jake's skull gleamed under the briefing room lights, and his enhanced arm moved with Mechanical precision. The creatures volunteer for the procedure, Jake replied. They understand the necessity of sacrifice for the greater good. Volunteer? Walsh's voice rose slightly. Have you seen what those things look like after the modifications? They're not even alive anymore in any meaningful sense. Jake felt a flash of the old anger that had once motivated him, but it passed quickly. Emotional responses were inefficient. The Cathara had taught him that much. The modifications ensure mission success. Personal feelings are secondary to tactical effectiveness. Admiral Kane dismissed the other officers, leaving only Jake in the briefing room. The older man studied Jake's appearance with obvious concern. Colonel Morrison, I need to ask you something directly. Do you still consider yourself human? Jake processed the question for several seconds before answering. The neural implants helped him analyze the Admiral's probable motivations for asking, but they also made emotional responses more difficult to access. I am what humanity needs me to be, sir. The enemy requires specific countermeasures. I have adapted to provide those countermeasures. Kane walked to the viewport and stared out at the joint fleet. Human ships had been modified with Cathara biotechnology, their clean lines now interrupted by organic growths and weapon systems that pulsed with their own life. The crews of those ships had undergone similar modifications, transforming themselves into hybrid warriors capable of matching alien combat effectiveness. We're winning battles, Morrison, but I'm not sure we're still fighting for the same thing we started this war to protect. Jake joined Kane at the viewport. Through his enhanced vision, he could see details of ship modifications that would be invisible to unenhanced eyes. The technology was beautiful in its efficiency, each change serving a specific tactical purpose. Earth will survive, Jake said. That's what matters. Will it still be Earth when we're done? Will the people living there still be human? Before Jake could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. His neural implants immediately connected to the tactical network, feeding him information about incoming Devourer forces. 3 enemy battleships had emerged from hyperspace, at the edge of the system, accompanied by over 50 support vessels. Admiral, we need to respond immediately, Jake said, his voice taking on the urgent tone his alien training had taught him. The Devourers will begin adaptive analysis of our fleet composition within minutes. Kane moved to the communication console. All ships, prepare for immediate assault. This is a Priority 1 engagement. Jake felt the familiar rush of pre-combat stimulants as his implants automatically prepared his body for battle. The sensation was no longer strange or uncomfortable. He had grown to depend on the enhanced reflexes and pain suppression the modifications provided. In the hangar bay of the New Athens, Jake's fighter squadron prepared for launch. The pilots under his command were a mix of humans and Cathara, their ships equipped with the most advanced biomechanical weapons available. Some of the human pilots still showed signs of discomfort with their modifications, but they followed orders without question. Amy Chen approached Jake as he performed pre-flight checks on his fighter. Her own modifications were minimal compared to his, consisting mainly of neural interfaces required for piloting hybrid technology. She had refused the more extensive combat enhancements, claiming they were unnecessary for a science officer. Jake, I've been monitoring communications from Earth, she said quietly. The reports about our methods are causing panic among civilian populations. Some are calling us traitors to human values. Jake's enhanced hearing picked up the stress indicators in her voice, but the emotional significance felt distant and unimportant. His tactical analysis systems were already calculating optimal attack vectors for the coming engagement. Earth Command approved all modification protocols, he replied. Civilian opinions are not relevant to mission parameters. Chen stepped closer, lowering her voice further. Listen to yourself. That's not how you used to talk. That's not how humans talk. Jake paused in his preparations and looked directly at her. Through his enhanced vision, he could see her elevated heart rate and the stress chemicals her body was producing. The data suggested she was experiencing significant emotional distress, but he found it difficult to understand why. I talk the way that ensures mission success. Emotional language introduces variables that reduce tactical effectiveness. Jake, you're talking about people like their equipment. When did efficiency become more important than compassion? The question triggered something in Jake's unmodified brain tissue, a brief flash of memory from before his transformation. He remembered feeling protective toward his crew, worrying about their safety, caring about their well-being beyond their tactical utility. The memory felt foreign now, like something he had experienced in a dream. Compassion is a luxury we cannot afford, he said, repeating words Vexthul had taught him. The enemy shows no mercy. We must match their ruthlessness or face extinction. Chen's expression showed something that Jake's analytical systems identified as fear, but not fear of the enemy. She was afraid of him, of what he had become. The realization should have disturbed him, but instead he filed it away as tactically irrelevant information. The launch order came through his neural link, bypassing his normal hearing entirely. Jake sealed his fighter's canopy and activated the biomechanical systems that would interface with his body during combat. Pain shot through his nervous system as the connections established themselves, but he barely noticed. Pain had become as routine as breathing. The battle that followed demonstrated everything Jake had learned about Cathara tactics. His squadron attacked the Devourer formation with suicidal bravery, accepting massive casualties in exchange for destroying key enemy vessels. Human pilots followed his orders to ram their fighters into enemy battleships, trusting their deaths would serve the greater strategic purpose. Jake watched 12 of his pilots die in the first minutes of combat, their fighters consumed by Devourer defensive fire. The old Jake Morrison would have felt grief, anger, or at least regret. The new Jake simply calculated the tactical value of their sacrifice and adjusted his attack plan accordingly. When the battle ended, the human Cathara fleet had achieved another victory. The Devourer force was completely destroyed, with minimal losses to the joint fleet's capital ships. But Jake's fighter squadron had been reduced to less than half strength, and 3 of the surviving pilots were too badly injured to return to active duty. In his post-battle report, Jake classified the engagement as a complete success. The tactical objectives had been achieved within acceptable loss parameters. He made no mention of the human cost because his enhanced analysis systems no longer recognized such considerations as relevant to military effectiveness. That night, alone in his quarters aboard the Bone Render, Jake received a personal message from Earth. His sister Sarah had sent a video recording showing his nephew taking his first steps. The child stumbled and fell, then got up and tried again, laughing with pure joy at his small achievement. Jake watched the recording 3 times, trying to understand why his sister had thought he would want to see it. His tactical systems found no military value in the information, but something in his unmodified brain tissue responded to the child's laughter. For a brief moment, he remembered what it felt like to care about something beyond tactical effectiveness. Then his neural implants automatically suppressed the emotional response, classifying it as a distraction from mission priorities. Jake deleted the message and returned to planning the next assault against Devourer Positi. Jake Morrison stood before the tactical display in the command center of the UES Meridian, his original ship now barely recognizable after months of Cathara modifications. Biomechanical conduits grew along the walls like veins, pulsing with alien energy that powered hybrid weapon systems. The crew around him moved with the mechanical precision he had learned to value, their own modifications allowing them to interface directly with the ship's evolved systems. 2 months remained before the Devourer main fleet would reach Earth, and Jake had returned to take command of human forces for the final preparations. Captain Rodriguez watched him with barely concealed horror as he reviewed casualty reports from their recent victories. His face had lost all expression, his enhanced eyes glowing with the same cold light as Cathara optics. 1,400 human. "Lives lost in the last engagement," Rodriguez said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "That's more than we lost in the entire Centauri War." Jake processed the information without looking up from his data tablet. His neural implants calculated the strategic value of those deaths against the tactical advantages gained. The mathematics were clear and satisfying in their simplicity. "Acceptable losses for the intelligence gathered," he replied. "The data from that engagement will save thousands of lives when the main fleet arrives." Rodriguez stepped closer, forcing Jake to look directly at her. "Jake, these weren't numbers on a display. These were people with families, with children waiting for them to come home. When did you stop caring about that?" Jake tilted his head slightly, analyzing her emotional state through micro-expressions and stress indicators his enhanced senses could detect. She was experiencing significant psychological distress, but he found it difficult to understand why. The deaths had served their purpose. "Emotional attachment to individual casualties reduces command effectiveness," he said, repeating one of Vexthal's lessons. "A commander who grieves for necessary losses cannot make the decisions required for victory." "Listen to yourself," Rodriguez said. "You sound exactly like them. Like the aliens." Before Jake could respond, Amy Chen entered the command center, carrying a datapad with obvious urgency. Her own modifications were still minimal compared to his, consisting mainly of the neural interfaces required for ship operations. She had continued to refuse the combat enhancements that Jake considered essential. "Jake, we've received new intelligence about Devourer capabilities," she said. "Their main fleet is larger than we estimated, 3 times larger." Jake accepted the datapad and absorbed the information through his neural link. The tactical situation was indeed worse than previous calculations had suggested. The enemy fleet contained over 2,000 vessels, including battleships that dwarfed anything in human or Kythera space. "Recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7, Jake said after processing the data. "All civilian populations in the outer colonies should be evacuated to the inner systems for use as tactical resources." Rodriguez stared at him in shock. "Tactical resources? You're talking about using civilians as bait." "The Devourers prioritize high-population targets. We can use this behavior to control their fleet movements and create opportunities for concentrated attacks." Chen grabbed Jake's arm, her fingers unable to find purchase on the biomechanical surfaces that now covered much of his body. "Jake, you're talking about sacrificing entire colonies, millions of innocent people." Jake looked down at her hand on his modified arm. His enhanced nervous system registered the pressure, but not the intended emotional significance of the gesture. Human. Physical contact had become as meaningless to him as most other human behaviors. "The colonies cannot be defended against a fleet of that size," he said. "Their populations will be consumed by the enemy regardless. Better to use their deaths strategically than waste them on futile defensive actions." Rodriguez activated the ship's communication system and opened a channel to Earth Command. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Meridian. I'm officially requesting that Colonel Morrison be relieved of command and returned to Earth for psychological evaluation." Jake's tactical systems immediately calculated the political implications of Rodriguez's action. His removal from command would delay implementation of necessary defensive strategies and reduce overall fleet effectiveness by approximately 12%. Such delays could not be tolerated. "Captain Rodriguez, you are relieved of duty," Jake said, his voice carrying the flat authority his modifications had taught him. "Security! Escort her to quarters under protective custody." "Jake, you can't do this," Rodriguez protested as security personnel approached. "I'm your superior officer." "You are experiencing emotional compromise that prevents effective decision-making," Jake replied. "Your continued presence in the command structure represents a tactical liability." As Rodriguez was escorted away, Jake turned his attention back to the tactical display. The Devourer fleet would arrive at Earth in approximately 63 days. Human and Cathara forces combined could not match that level of firepower through conventional methods. More extreme measures would be required. Jake activated his personal communication system and requested a direct link to Vex Thul aboard the Bone Render. The alien commander's image appeared on his display, showing fresh modifications since their last meeting. Additional weapon systems had been grafted to its torso, and its original head had been partially replaced with a more advanced targeting array. Human Flesh Morrison, you have reviewed the new intelligence about enemy strength, Vex Thul said through the neural link that now caused Jake no pain at all. Your recommendations? Complete biological modification of all human military personnel, Jake replied without hesitation. Full conversion to Cathara combat specifications, emotional suppression protocols for maximum tactical efficiency. Vex Thul made the scraping sound that passed for approval among his species. You understand necessity at last. Your transformation progresses well. There is more, Jake continued. I recommend immediate harvesting of human civilian populations. For bioweapon construction, their neural patterns can be preserved in combat organisms while their bodies serve tactical purposes. Even Vex Thul paused at this suggestion. You would convert your own species into living weapons? The enemy shows no distinction between military and civilian targets. We should adopt the same approach for maximum resource utilization. Interesting, Vex Thul said. You have surpassed even Cathara ruthlessness. Perhaps there is hope for your species after all. After ending the communication, Jake stood alone in the command center surrounded by displays showing the approaching enemy fleet. His enhanced analytical systems had already begun calculating the most efficient methods for implementing his recommendations. Earth's population of 8 billion could be converted into approximately 4 million combat organisms, each one equivalent to a dozen conventional fighters. Amy Chen appeared beside him, having remained silent during his conversation with Vex Thul. Her face showed an expression that Jake's memory banks identified as grief, though he could no longer understand the emotional context. Jake, what have you become? She asked quietly. Jake turned to look at her, processing her question through. Multiple analytical frameworks. What had he become? His modifications had enhanced every aspect of his military capabilities. He could process tactical information faster than any unmodified human, interface directly with alien technology, and make command decisions without the emotional interference that plagued lesser officers. I have become what humanity needs to survive, he said. Evolution in response to environmental pressure? But are you still human? Jake considered the question for several seconds. His genetic structure remained largely unchanged, though significant portions of his nervous system had been replaced or enhanced. His thought patterns followed logical frameworks derived from Cathara military doctrine. His emotional responses had been systematically suppressed to improve tactical efficiency. Human is a classification that has become tactically irrelevant, he replied. Survival is the only meaningful category. Chen stepped back from him, her expression showing what his analytical systems identified as fear and revulsion. You're not Jake anymore. You're something else wearing his face. Jake processed her words as he would any other data input. Her assessment was emotionally motivated and therefore suspect, but it contained elements that matched his own self-analysis. The person who had first boarded the Cathara vessel was gone, replaced by something more efficient and tactically effective. The Jake Morrison you knew was inadequate for current mission requirements, he said. I am the necessary improvement. That night, alone in his quarters, Jake reviewed video messages from Earth that had accumulated during his transformation. His family had sent dozens of recordings showing holidays, birthdays, and ordinary moments they had wanted to share with him. He watched them all with clinical detachment, analyzing the emotional content as data rather than personal communication. His sister Sarah appeared in the most recent message, holding her young son who had grown considerably since Jake's last leave. The child waved at the camera and called out Uncle Jake, with obvious affection. Sarah's face showed worry and love in equal measure as she spoke about hoping he would come home safely. Jake deleted all the messages without responding. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal death, their ships blotting out the stars around Earth's solar system. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the command vessel, watching 2,000 enemy battleships take formation, each one capable of destroying entire planets. His enhanced tactical systems calculated odds of survival and returned numbers so low they barely registered as possibilities. Commander Vex Thul's image appeared on the communication display, the aliens' multiple weapon systems already charging for the final battle. Human Flesh Morrison, deploy all forces for coordinated ramming attacks. We will break their formation with acceptable losses. Jake processed the battle plan through his neural implants. Vexathul's strategy called for the sacrifice of 70% of the joint fleet in exchange for destroying perhaps 20% of the enemy. The mathematics were clear, but something felt wrong about the calculation, though he couldn't identify what. Acknowledged, Jake replied. All human forces will comply with ramming protocols. As Jake prepared to transmit the attack orders, Amy Chen appeared beside him carrying a data tablet. Her face showed the same mixture of determination and fear he had seen throughout their service together, but now he could barely remember why such expressions had once mattered to him. Jake, I've been analyzing the Devourer command structure, she said urgently. Their fleet coordination depends on a central control matrix. If we could disable it instead of fighting ship by ship, we might have a chance. Jake's enhanced systems immediately evaluated her proposal. The tactical analysis showed potential merit, but the approach required precision strikes rather than the massed assault tactics the Cathara had perfected. It also depended on human creativity and adaptability rather than proven methods of overwhelming force. The plan has insufficient probability of success, Jake said. We will proceed with established protocols. But Jake, look at the numbers. Vex Thul's plan will get everyone killed. This approach might actually save Earth. Jake turned to face her, his modified features showing no emotion as he processed her words. His neural implants flagged her emotional state as compromised, her attachment to preserving human life, creating tactical blindness that prevented proper assessment of battlefield realities. Sentiment is clouding your judgment, he replied. The Cathara have fought this enemy for 2 centuries. Their methods are proven effective. Chen stepped closer, forcing Jake to meet her eyes. Jake, the Cathara have been losing for 2 centuries. They've lost 43 worlds using these same tactics. Maybe it's time to try something different. The words triggered something unexpected in Jake's consciousness. His neural implants tried to suppress the response, classifying it as emotional interference, but the thought persisted. The Cathara had indeed been losing consistently despite their tactical effectiveness. Their methods preserved their ability to fight, but not their ability to win. Before Jake could respond, Captain Rodriguez appeared on the bridge, accompanied by Danny Walsh and a dozen other officers from his original crew. Jake's security systems identified them as potential threats, noting that they were armed and showing signs of coordinated movement. Jake, we're not going to let you send our people to die for nothing, Rodriguez said. Your orders are to implement a suicidal attack that serves no strategic purpose. Jake calculated the tactical implications of the confrontation. His loyal forces could easily overwhelm Rodriguez's group, but doing so would waste time needed for battle preparations. More efficiently, he could simply ignore their protests and proceed with the mission. Your emotional attachment to individual survival is tactically irrelevant, Jake said. The mission parameters are clear. Walsh stepped forward, his face showing the same revulsion Jake had grown accustomed to seeing in unmodified humans. Jake, listen to yourself. You're not talking like a human being anymore. You're talking like one of them. The Cathara have adapted successfully to combat requirements, Jake replied. Humanity must do the same or face extinction. At what cost? Rodriguez demanded. Look around you, Jake. Look at what we've become. Are we still fighting to save humanity, or are we just fighting to preserve something that used to be human? Jake's analytical systems processed the question and found it philosophically meaningless. Survival was the only objective that mattered. Cultural preservation was a luxury for species not facing immediate extinction, but as he prepared to dismiss their concerns, Jake's unenhanced memory circuits activated unexpectedly. He remembered standing on this same bridge months ago, feeling protective toward his crew and concerned about their welfare. He remembered making decisions based on more than tactical mathematics, considering the human cost of victory alongside strategic necessity. The memories felt foreign now, like experiences from someone else's life. His modifications had systematically removed the emotional framework that had once guided his thinking. But the memories persisted, showing him what he had been before the transformation. Amy Chen activated a communication display showing Earth below them. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful, its blue oceans and white clouds unchanged despite the approaching battle. Cities glowed with warm light where millions of people lived their lives unaware that their fate was being decided in the cold. Mathematics of space combat. Jake, my brother lives down there, Chen said quietly. He's a teacher in New York. He spends his days helping children learn to read and write. He's never fired a weapon or hurt another person in his entire life. Is he worth saving? Jake's tactical systems immediately classified the question as an attempt at emotional manipulation. Individual civilian lives had no strategic value beyond their potential conversion to military resources. But looking at Earth's surface, he found himself trying to remember what it felt like to care about individual human lives. Strategic value of single civilian is negligible, he said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. What about 1,000 civilians? 1,000,000? At what point do human lives start to matter to you again? Jake processed the question through multiple analytical frameworks, but none of them provided a satisfactory answer. His modifications had eliminated the emotional responses that would have made such calculations meaningful. Rodriguez activated another display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Jake, I'm relieving you of command. You're no longer competent to lead human forces. Jake's combat systems immediately prepared to respond to the threat, but something stopped him. Through his enhanced sensors, he could detect the fear and determination radiating from his former crew. They were willing to risk court-martial and possibly death to prevent him from following orders they considered morally wrong. The realization triggered a cascade of suppressed memories. Jake remembered these people as friends and colleagues, not just tactical resources. He remembered caring about their opinions and welfare. He remembered being the kind of person who would have made the same choice they were making now. Computer, display current fleet composition, Jake said suddenly. The tactical display showed the combined human Kithara force arranged for Vex Thul's ramming attack. Jake studied the formation with his enhanced analytical capabilities, but now he also tried to see it through unmodified human perception. What he saw horrified him. Every ship in the human fleet had been modified beyond recognition, their crews transformed into biomechanical hybrids who followed orders without question or emotional response. They had become as monstrous as the aliens they fought alongside, creatures who measured victory only in terms of acceptable losses and tactical efficiency. Chen, transmit your alternative battle plan to all human vessels, Jake said quietly. Vex Thul's image immediately appeared. On the communication display, the alien commander's weapon systems glowing with aggressive energy. Human Flesh Morrison, you deviate from established protocols. This behavior is tactically unsound. Jake looked directly at the alien who had taught him to become a monster. Commander Vexathul, human forces will implement alternative tactics. We will coordinate with Kithara units, but not follow ramming protocols. Your species lacks the courage for necessary sacrifice, Vex Thul replied. You will fail, and your world will be consumed. Maybe, Jake said, feeling something like his original personality stirring beneath the layers of modification. But we'll fail as humans, not as poor copies of something else. The battle that followed was unlike anything either species had ever attempted. Instead of massed suicidal charges, human forces used precision strikes and coordinated maneuvers that required trust and communication rather than blind obedience. They rescued damaged Cathera vessels despite tactical disadvantages, shared resources across species lines, and adapted their strategies based on battlefield developments rather than predetermined doctrine. Jake found himself remembering how to lead through inspiration rather than fear, how to make decisions that considered both tactical necessity and human values. His modifications still provided enhanced capabilities, but he began using them to protect his people rather than simply achieve military objectives. The turning point came when Chen's analysis proved correct. The Devourer fleet's coordination did depend on central control systems that could be disrupted through creative tactics rather than brute force. Human unpredictability and willingness T.